Ethan learned early that the world rewards those who look strong, not those who choose to be kind. He was only 12 when responsibility settled into his bones, quiet and heavy, like winter that never truly leaves. His mornings began before the sun, in a house that smelled of old wood and silence. His father had left years ago. His mother worked double shifts. And Ethan learned to move through life without making noise, as if silence itself was a way of surviving. Every morning, he walked the same cracked road to school, passing rusted fences and broken streetlights. And every morning at the abandoned bus stop near the edge of town, she waited for him. Her name was Lyra. She sat in a worn wheelchair that barely rolled anymore, her legs folded lifelessly beneath a thin blanket. Her skin was pale in a way that never quite matched the seasons. And her hair, strangely silver even under dirt and shadow, was always tucked under a scarf. People said she was disabled, born wrong, fragile. Teachers avoided her eyes. Children whispered cruel guesses. Some said she was cursed. Some said she shouldn't even be in school. Ethan never asked what was wrong with her. On the first day, he offered to help. Lyra had looked up at him with startled eyes, as if kindness itself was something unfamiliar. "It's heavy," she warned softly, pointing to the chair. "I know," Ethan said, already crouching. He lifted her carefully, as if instinctively understanding that she wasn't just weak, she was breakable. Her arms hesitated before wrapping around his shoulders, light as feathers, trembling with disbelief. From that day on, he carried her not just once. Not just when it was convenient. He carried her every single morning, step by step, all the way to school. Through rain that soaked his clothes. Through heat that burned his skin. Through laughter that followed them like stones thrown from unseen hands. Sometimes his legs shook. Sometimes his back screamed in quiet protest. But Lyra never complained. Ethan never stopped. She smelled faintly of something he couldn't name, not perfume. It's not soap, something clean and strange, like rain that hadn't touched the ground yet. When he walked, she would rest her head carefully against his shoulder, listening to his heartbeat as if it told her secrets about being human. "Does it hurt?" she asked one morning, her voice barely louder than the wind, only a little. Ethan lied. Lyra was different from other children. She didn't talk much, but when she did, her questions felt too big for someone her age. She asked why humans feared silence. Why they hurt each other to feel powerful. Why sadness made people closer than happiness ever could. Ethan didn't always know how to answer, so he answered honestly. "I think people forget they're not alone," said once. Lyra thought about that for a long time. At school, Ethan set her down gently every day, ignoring the stares. He waited until she was settled before taking his seat at the back of the classroom. Teachers praised him with tired smiles, the kind that meant well but didn't change anything. No one offered to help him. No one asked if he was tired. Lyra noticed. She noticed how his hands sometimes trembled when he stood, how he skipped lunch to save money, how he flinched when other boys mocked him for being the girl carrier. And every night, when she returned to her dark, silent house at the edge of town, she cried for him, because Lyra was not human when the doors closed and the lights stayed off. Her eyes glowed faintly violet. Invisible symbols formed in the air around her, ancient and alive. Far beyond Earth's sky, systems awakened in response to her presence. Satellites shifted. Stars listened, and far beyond the stars. Her mother watched. The Empress of the Galaxy stood before a living map of the universe, her form radiant and terrifying. Thousands of worlds bowed to her will. Entire species had risen and fallen under her command. Earth was nothing more than a fragile blue dot on the edge of her empire, rich in resources. Poor in defenses. She remains there too long, a general warned. Her body cannot sustain the disguise. She chose this, the Empress replied, her voice calm but heavy. Her eyes rested on the image of a boy carrying her daughter through dust and ridicule. "And so we wait." Lyra knew her time was limited. Her human form was failing. Each day she stayed, her strength faded. But every morning when Ethan bent down without being asked, when he smiled despite the weight on his back, She wondered how a universe so vast had produced something so gentle. One evening, as the sun sank red behind the houses, Lyra whispered, "Why do you help me?" Ethan didn't stop walking. "Because if I don't, who will?" That answer hurt more than any weapon. Lyra pressed her face against his shoulder and closed her eyes, memorizing the sound of his breath, the rhythm of his steps, the feeling of being carried not as a burden but as someone worth protecting above them. The stars shifted slightly. The galaxy was watching, and it was about to learn that the smallest acts of kindness can outweigh the heaviest crowns. The day Ethan's world cracked began as an ordinary morning. The sky was pale, almost indifferent, and the street smelled of wet asphalt from last night's rain. He had woken early, as always, tying his worn shoelaces while Lyra waited silently by the doorway, her scarf loosely hiding her glowing violet hair. She didn't speak much anymore, not since the night she had looked at him and whispered, almost as if testing the wind, "I wish you knew." Ethan never knew, and she had no intention of telling him yet. They set off down the cracked road, the same one that had seen every step of their journey together. Ethan carried her steady as always, weight pressing against him in a way that made his back ache even before the first block. And yet, somehow, it was comforting. Every step they took together was a heartbeat in the world, fragile yet defiant. Halfway to school, something changed. His legs, usually so reliable, betrayed him. Pain stabbed up from his knees, sharp and unforgiving. His breath hitched. Lyra's violet eyes widened in alarm, and instinctively she reached out to steady him. But this time, he didn't recover. His knees buckled, and both of them fell to the ground. Ethan's palms scraped against the gravel. Dust and blood mingled in a bitter taste. His chest heaved. He wanted to stand, to keep moving, but his body refused. I'm okay," he gasped, even as his vision blurred. Even as every muscle screamed betrayal. Lyra's hands shook as she leaned closer, brushing the sweat from his forehead. No, you're not," she whispered, voice cracking. Fear she had never known before clawed at her. Ethan had always been strong, always, and now he was broken before her eyes. Something inside her stirred, ancient and powerful. The air around them seemed to hum with energy. Ethan felt warmth flood his chest, light spreading through his body, dissolving the pain, binding the wounds he hadn't even realized were open. Time seemed to bend. The wind paused. Even the birds froze mid-flight. Lyra's small hands glowed faintly violet as she pressed them to his forehead. "Lyra, what are you doing?" He gasped, his voice trembling. I can't let you fall," she whispered, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. Her voice was both a plea and a confession. And in that moment, Ethan realized the truth. Not fully. Not yet, but enough to shatter the fragile world he thought he understood. When the street finally resumed its motion, Ethan stood unhurt, stronger than before. But Lyra trembled beside him, her shoulders shaking as she hid her face. "I am not what you think," she said. Ethan stared at her, confusion wrinkling his young face. "You're a girl," he asked, a weak attempt at humor in a moment too heavy for levity. "No," Lyra said softly, "I am not human." The words struck him like a cold wind. She was fragile, yes, but not because of weakness. Not because of sickness. She was something else entirely. And all this time, he'd carried her without ever understanding the weight of what he truly held. That night, the truth arrived with the stars. It began with a soft hum, low and vibrating in the air. Windows rattled in houses miles away. Animals howled in confusion. And then, silently, without a single alarm or broadcast, ships appeared in the sky. Enormous, sleek, impossibly alien. They hovered over cities and forests alike, moving as if guided by thought alone. No weapons fired. No panic ensued. But the world knew without words that something extraordinary had arrived. And at the center of it all stood the Empress. She was taller than buildings. Her presence bending the light around her, her voice both gentle and absolute. It echoed inside Ethan's mind even before it reached his ears. "My daughter has suffered among your people," she declared, "and yet she has been loved." Lyra stepped forward, her form no longer limited by human frailty. Her legs, once useless, now supported her gracefully. Her hair shimmered like starlight. Her eyes blazed violet fire. Ethan stumbled backward, overwhelmed, frightened, awed. "I chose to stay here," she whispered to him, her voice both human and cosmic. "I chose to walk among you, to learn, to be cared for. And I chose you." Ethan's mind spun. "Me? Why me?" he asked. "I'm nothing." "You carried me," she said, voice breaking. "Every day. You never asked why, you never complained, you never left me behind. You saw me as someone worth helping, and that mattered more than you will ever know." The Empress, looming above them, watched silently. Her gaze fell on Ethan, evaluating, calculating. "You have borne the weight of my daughter without knowing her worth," she said, her tone almost reverent. "Ask for anything. Anything at all." Ethan thought of power, wealth, fame, of a life where he would never struggle, never carry burdens too heavy for his young shoulders. But his eyes wandered to Lyra, standing in the glow of starlight, fragile no longer, yet still human in the ways that mattered. "I want her to stay," he said finally. The Empress paused. Across the galaxy, stars seemed to hold their breath, and then, slowly, she nodded. "So it shall be," she declared, "because he has proven that kindness is stronger than dominion and love weighs more than conquest." The ships disappeared as silently as they had come. The night returned to normal, yet nothing on Earth or in Ethan's heart would ever be the same. Lyra collapsed into his arms, her glowing form fading into something softer, more human. Tears streaked her cheeks as she whispered, I am yours now. Only because you carried me when no one else would." Ethan held her, shivering from exhaustion, fear, and awe all at once. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore," he said. "I'll be here always." And in that moment, for the first time in his life, Ethan understood the true weight of what he had done. Every step, every burden he had carried, every whisper of courage he had offered in silence, it had mattered. Not just to a girl, but to an entire universe. He realized something else too. Pain was inevitable. Fear would always follow. But Lovriel's selfless love was unstoppable. It could stop wars, bend stars, even command the attention of empires. And he had wielded it without even knowing it. Lyra smiled through her tears, resting her head against his shoulder. I think the universe is finally listening," she said. Ethan kissed the top of her head, words failing him. There was nothing to say that could encompass the truth. No praise, no prayer, no hope could capture the enormity of the moment. Outside, the night air shimmered faintly. Somewhere far above, unseen and eternal, the galaxy watched. And it waited not for conquest, not for judgment, but for the next step, the next act of courage, the next kind soul willing to carry the weight of another. Ethan walked home that night, Lyra leaning on him gently, lighter than ever, but still needing him. And he understood fully that some burdens are gifts, some sacrifices shape destinies, and that sometimes carrying another person can carry the universe along with them. Years passed. But Ethan never grew used to the quiet weight of wonder that settled around him. Lyra walked now fully human, fully fragile, but she still leaned on him sometimes. Just a little, as if the years of being carried had left a memory etched into their bones. The galaxy had returned to its distant silence, though it was never really gone. Ships still circled unseen. Stars still whispered secrets. Somewhere far beyond Earth, the Empress watched. Her presence always a silent shadow, her patience a reminder that every act of kindness had consequences far beyond imagination. Ethan and Lyra lived as ordinary children first, then ordinary teenagers, and eventually ordinary adults. They went to school, they laughed. They fought petty battles that now seemed almost ridiculous in the face of what they had witnessed. But life's ordinary rhythm could not erase the extraordinary truths they carried. They had learned something impossible to teach, that small choices, the ones no one noticed, could bend the will of entire worlds. Lyra often sat by the window at night, tracing the stars with her fingers, remembering the immense weight of her mother's throne, the ships that could crush cities in a blink, the galaxies she once commanded with thought alone. "You ever miss it?" Ethan asked quietly one night, his voice breaking the silence of her room. She looked at him, his eyes reflecting the faint starlight. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I wouldn't trade this life for all the galaxies." Ethan smiled. Though his chest ached with a truth he could not fully voice, he had carried her when no one else would. And now he carried the knowledge that the universe itself had changed because of him. Not because of power, not because of conquest, but because of compassion, something so small, so human, yet so overwhelmingly potent. One evening the Empress appeared. Not in a fleet of ships this time, not with the weight of her empire pressing down. She stood in their backyard, tall, luminous, her eyes softer than Ethan had imagined possible. Lyra ran to her, but this time not out of fear, out of recognition, love, and respect. "You two have taught me something," the Empress said, voice resonating like music in every corner of the world. "That compassion can outweigh dominion. That a boy who carries a girl, not knowing who she is, can change the course of a galaxy." Ethan bowed his head. "We didn't know," he whispered. "We just cared," and that, the Empress replied, "is why you matter." She did not demand allegiance. She did not ask for titles or obedience. Instead, she spoke of law, galactic law, rewritten. No world may be conquered without first understanding its children. No species may be enslaved without measuring kindness and love alongside strength. Her words rippled across the cosmos, unheard by most but felt by all. A quiet revolution anchored in empathy. Ethan and Lyra stood together, watching as she vanished into the night, leaving behind no ships, no arms, only the echo of a lesson the universe itself could not ignore. Years turned into decades. Lyra and Ethan grew older, their bond deepening with the passage of time. She never returned to her throne, choosing a mortal life, vulnerable and fleeting. But in doing so, she gave the universe something more valuable than rule: a story. A living example of love that could reshape empires without violence. Ethan aged, but not in the way that weakened him. He became tall and quiet, his eyes carrying the memory of a boy who once bore a fragile weight and discovered that even the smallest acts could echo across galaxies. He worked not for fame or fortune, but to nurture kindness wherever he could find it. And Lyra, always beside him, lived fully, laughed fully, and loved without restraint. Her humanity, a gift she had chosen to embrace. There were nights when they would sit on the rooftop, staring at the stars that had once seemed so impossibly distant. Lyra would lean her head against his shoulder, and he would feel that faint memory of being carried, the delicate balance of trust and care that had defined them from the start. "Do you ever think about what could have happened?" she asked softly. Ethan shook his head. "No, I think about what did happen. I think about carrying you every morning, about holding you when the world didn't notice. That's enough." Her hand found his fingers intertwining. "It's more than enough," she said. "It changed everything." Time moved forward, as relentless as ever, yet the impact of their lives stretched beyond it. The galaxy, once poised for conquest, now hesitated, measured, and listened. Worlds were no longer mere resources. Children were no longer invisible. Compassion had become a force that could not be ignored. One night, Lyra fell asleep with her head on Ethan's shoulder, and he traced the contours of her face, remembering every morning he had carried her. He remembered the pain in his knees, the fear of ridicule, the quiet satisfaction in knowing he had done the right thing. He realized that kindness, like the universe itself, was expansive, infinite and powerful beyond imagining. In his heart, he understood the final truth. He had never carried her because she was weak. He had carried her because love, silent and steadfast, is the greatest force in existence. It is heavier than any crown, stronger than any army, more enduring than time itself. And somewhere far above, the stars whispered approval. The Empress, observing silently from her distant throne, smiled for the first time in centuries. She had witnessed humanity through the eyes of a boy and his extraordinary companion. And she had learned something she could not teach herself. That even the mightiest empires could be shaped by something as small, fragile, and human as compassion. Ethan and Lyra grew old together, ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in impact. They told no one the story of the ships, of the Empress, of the galaxies, but it didn't matter. The universe remembered anyway. When Ethan's hands grew too weak to hold Lyra, she carried him softly, gently, lovingly, just as he had carried her. And in that perfect symmetry, they discovered the quiet magic of life, that every act of care, every choice to bear another's burden, ripples outward, touching stars, shaping destinies, and leaving echoes that even time cannot erase. And as the night deepened, as the galaxies turned far above, Lyra whispered into his ear, her voice trembling with emotion, "Thank you for carrying me." Ethan smiled, tears sliding down his cheeks. "No, thank you for letting me." And somewhere in a universe that had once been cold and indifferent, the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, honoring the boy who had carried a girl and, in doing so, had carried the weight of worlds.